Good day, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us for this webinar, which is entitled Build E-Commerce Apps on the Salesforce One Platform Using Heroku Connect. My name is Margaret Francis. I'm a Senior Director of Product Management at Heroku, and with me on the phone today is Piyush Pandya, CTO of Comity Designs.
Hello, everyone. Good day. Thanks, Margaret. So I'm Piyush Pandya. I'm with CTO for Comity Designs, and I'm responsible for technical architecture and delivery of product and custom solutions on the cloud.
Thank you so much, Piyush, for introducing yourself. We're going to give you guys a quick overview as to the webinar content. We're going to talk a little bit about why customers choose to build e-commerce apps on the Salesforce One platform using Heroku and Heroku Connect. And then we're going to give you some examples of customers that have done so. Piyush will be talking through one of his case studies, and I will be talking to one that I'm familiar with as well. So as we mentioned, today we'll be covering why customers are building apps on Salesforce and Heroku with Heroku Connect, how they're actually doing it, including kind of sample architectures, some vendor names, some integrations that have been done, some best practices and insights from those implementations, and then we're going to be doing some Q&A. So as you are, we're going through the webinar content, do please feel free to use the webinar questions box that's on your screen to go ahead and submit questions. Could be for me, could be for Piyush as we go along. It's absolutely fine to ask your questions as we go so that we can make sure we get good material to cover at the Q&A at the end. Because Salesforce is a publicly traded company, we do have to pay the nod to Safe Harbor. Please understand that anything that we may say could constitute a forward-looking statement. I think we're mostly talking about things that have already occurred in today's webinar presentation, so I don't expect there to be a whole lot of need, but do please be aware that everything we say is covered under Safe Harbor. So before we get too deep into e-commerce apps on Salesforce One, I did want to briefly cover what is Heroku. We get a lot of questions about Heroku here at Salesforce because even though Heroku was acquired by Salesforce several years ago, I'm not totally sure its place is always well understood in the overall Salesforce offering. Heroku is really part of the Salesforce platform, and what it is a platform as a service that gives you everything you need to build, run, and scale customer apps. And you can write those apps in really any language. So dynos are a core runtime environment. You can have a dev, a stage, a production environment. You can run web apps, mobile apps, hybrid apps. We've got an enterprise-grade Postgres as a service offering. We're big fans of Postgres here at Heroku. It's an absolutely wonderful database as a service offering we have, which Heroku Connect makes ample use of. And in addition to those more native products and services, we have an incredible ecosystem of partners. So any additional service that you might need to make your app functional could be payments, could be logging, could be a different kind of data store such as Redis or Hadoop. You can actually get through the Heroku add-ons marketplace. And so the reason that we see people often using Heroku is because they want to write an app in a language that is not Apex. They're writing their app in Java, they're writing it in PHP, they're writing it in Node or Clojure or some other language, and yet they want to make sure that they are doing it on a supported platform like Heroku.
Yes, Margaret, this is a very key point of Heroku for advantage for a lot of applications that our customers that we build the application for, they want to take advantage of this choice of the framework that they want to write their application on.
Yeah, it's a really key point for a lot of our Salesforce customers and partners. And I do want to emphasize, we've taken the same approach with Heroku inside the Salesforce platform as Salesforce really pioneered with the App Exchange and with its whole idea of a platform. We understand that we will never be able to do everything for our customers that we could do if we partnered well with a larger ecosystem of vendors. and other companies. So we've got all kinds of participants in the Heroku ecosystem from New Relic to Reddit's Green to Chargeify that provide easily integrated additional services for your application to use. So that's what Heroku is. And now I'm going to tell you a little bit about why people use Heroku. And I think in the context of Salesforce, and usually the people who register for these sorts of webinars are Salesforce customers, they're Salesforce prospects. They've been using Salesforce for 10 years and they know more about it than Piyush and I ever will. Why would I use Heroku, when I have Force? And so I wanted to kind of answer the question because you're going to see some examples of applications today that are built on Heroku. And the reason that they're built on Heroku is very simply this. When you're building a consumer or a customer-facing application, particularly one that you need to have natively distributed through the App Store with a very, sort of pixel-perfect creative experience, and in doing so, you wish to use open source developer, open source technology frameworks, languages other than Apex. We're seeing a ton of Node adoption right now. We've always had a ton of Ruby. Java is very prevalent for a lot of enterprise companies. We just get so many developers using the Heroku platform who really want to write their apps in languages that are well supported on Heroku, but which you can't write a Force.com app with. And yet they want to very easily integrate that app with the Salesforce system of record. It could be that they are moving product data or contact data or account data between this bespoke app and their Salesforce deployment. But this is really the driving use case behind adoption of Heroku within the Salesforce One platform, and it's a very compelling set of services and tools for developers who are doing development using one of these open source frameworks today. Piyush, I think we'll talk a little bit more about how sometimes the projects we get in this world are well executed on Force, and sometimes they actually do require some independent software development in one of those languages. And when that is the case, it is time to turn to Heroku. So what do brands use Heroku for? When they go out and they develop sites or apps, and we have a lot of different customers, different kinds of customers within the Heroku fold, it's very often one of these use cases. They are running a marketing campaign. We've got Super Bowl coming up right after the holidays. And, if you're looking for the platform that can absorb the, Super Bowl scale marketing campaign, you are going to turn to Heroku. If you are building websites and, media sites, if you're McSweeney's, if you're Toyota, and you are running car configurators for a lot of different lines of, vehicles out there, you are going to use Heroku. E-commerce, particularly on mobile applications. That's more indicative of something that Macy's is doing on the Heroku platform today, and so on and so forth. I mean, the thing I think I want to point out here most is that if you look at a brand like Lutron, which is, running some Internet of Things type projects on Heroku today, they never really thought that they would be building apps, particularly mobile apps that control lighting fixtures. It's nowhere in their mission statement of 1950 that they would be doing this work. But they have come to understand that in this day and age, every company has kind of become an app company because it's a required element to deliver on an omnichannel consumer experience or an omnichannel customer experience. You have to be present. You have to be present in the browser. You have to be present on the phone. And to do that, you're probably going to be creating an experience or an app of some type. And increasingly, those experiences demand the use of new frameworks and technologies such as Node, such as PHP, which Heroku likewise supports, same VM as Facebook uses. So this is an incredibly important point for everyone out there who is really very happy with their Salesforce deployment right now and is wondering why they're on this webinar thinking about what's next. Well, what's next for next year? It's really thinking about how to go out to the edge and delivering your brand experience. And I assure you, Red Robin of the restaurant brand that does, famous hamburgers. I don't know that they thought that they would be in the app business, but in 2014, coming up on 2015, they surely are. All right. So one other helpful way to think about this, particularly for folks who are coming from an area where they know a lot more about Salesforce than they do about Heroku today, is that we rely deeply on Force.com to build very internal and employee-facing apps. It's just so fast to build an app on Salesforce. One, you can configure, you can deploy. If you don't need an absolutely sort of, pixel-specific user experience, wow, Force.com is a great way to get an employee-facing, internally-facing app out the door fast. But if you are doing something like a Lyft, something like an Instacart, something that is, much more particular in its brand presentation, and the key factor is engagement and interactivity, you're going to be looking more towards Heroku. Piyush, I don't know if that informed your decision to go with Heroku in the customer example we're going to talk through later.
Yes, that was one of the key reasons also for us to use the Heroku as a platform for our application, because in the e-commerce, the brand experience is the key, and also the user experience that the user would be able to achieve. We were not able to achieve using standard Salesforce One experience.
Yeah, so that's an incredibly important point. And, yet at the same time, we know that many of our customers really want that bespoke consumer app distributed via, iTunes to integrate seamlessly with their Salesforce deployment. There might be a business process, there might be content, there might be customer or account information that needs to seamlessly integrate between that app and between a Salesforce deployment. We're seeing a ton of apps right now where we actually really need to get user cases and user information back to Service Cloud deployments right now. I want to build this beautiful mobile app, but I want all the service to come through the Service Cloud. And the unifying technology here is really Heroku Connect. I am the PM for Heroku Connect, and what Heroku Connect is and does is it bidirectionally syncs data between a Salesforce deployment and a Heroku Postgres database. And the reason for doing that is so that any developer can write an app, a PHP app, a Node app, a Java app, doesn't really matter what it is, and they can work with Salesforce data using standard SQL. And I'm going to show you an example of how that works kind of from the developer perspective a little later in this webinar. But what's really critical about that is that you do not have to have a developer who knows both Node and Apex. You can find a developer who knows Node, and you can expose an operational data store, which is a slice of your Salesforce data, in a Heroku Postgres database, and it greatly accelerates the speed with which you can develop an app, and perhaps more critically, the fact that it can be integrated into your existing business processes, your existing CRM system, your existing sales and service and other key kind of business operations is totally important and really enables companies to build lasting value and not just to build sort of marketing apps that are a flash in the pan, but marketing apps that deepen consumer data, that deepen business process integration. It's really very important. And, we have a lot of customers for Heroku Connect now that are really at the high end of what I would call a Salesforce deployment in terms of the extent to which they use all of the clouds, the number of records which they sync between Salesforce, a Salesforce org or multiple Salesforce orgs, and a Heroku Postgres database. So I encourage you all, if you're not familiar with Heroku Connect and you're thinking about building an app, to start to plan for it now, because it really makes integrating with Salesforce so much easier. And we're going to give you a quick demo of how data that is gathered on a native mobile app seamlessly and instantly synchronizes to a Salesforce deployment, and that is kind of the takeaway for Heroku Connect. So let me hand it over to Piyush now to walk you through an example of a customer who's actually built an e-commerce system that incorporates Salesforce, Heroku, and Heroku Connect.
Thank you, Margaret. Thanks for that great introduction of what Heroku platform is and what the feature and functionality that the Heroku provides. So here is a little bit background about Comity Designs. So we are a boutique Salesforce and Heroku development shop. We were founded by VP of Product Strategy at Salesforce, and we bring unique cloud product development mindset to our projects. We have developed and delivered more than 350 Salesforce projects, and we are laser sharp focused on customer satisfaction. In addition to being the Salesforce partner, we are also a specialized Heroku partner. We specialize in Service Cloud implementation, and we are also the Salesforce product development partner. The reason this is important is that we are leveraging currently the Heroku platform in working with one of our ISV who is developing a product where we are bringing the power of both the platform to deliver the unique product to the marketplace in the Internet of Things industries. Right? And let me go to the next slide. Okay. So we have worked with very fast-growing technology companies such as Box, LinkedIn, Twitter, to large corporations in financial service or healthcare and logistics world. We have developed collaboration applications, customer and partner communities, e-commerce portal, and to the logistic applications that capture very large volume of device data from the Internet of Things. So let me talk specifically in this webinar for one of our customer where we build the e-commerce portal. For this customer is a very fast-growing internet security software provider. They provide their software in two ways. They provide the free version to their end customers, as well as they provide the premium versions that is based on the subscription business. And typically their product is sold to their end customer who are like home users as well as the business users. The consumer transactions that the e-commerce portal that we built was needed to support were in very high volume but low dollar value. So the transaction would run in millions, but each transaction's value would be from like $10 to low hundreds based on the annual subscription. In case of business transactions, the transactions were low volume but high dollar amount because their business transactions were mainly done through their direct sales from the channel sales, and they were managed through the Salesforce. So this customer already had the Salesforce CRM implementation, and they were using their inside channel sales to make a lot of go through the business transactions. The key thing considerations that we had to take into account while building the e-commerce portal for them is that one of their main idea that they had was that they did not want it to have anything hosted on their premise. So they wanted a cloud-based e-commerce solutions. The other main requirement was that they needed something that would the solution to integrate with their existing Salesforce, like Margaret mentioned, to take advantage of the existing business process and also the data, because they were going to use the Salesforce Service Cloud to provide the end customer the services through the Service Cloud implementation. And the other key area was that the solution that was going to should meet the scalability and should be expandable, right? So typically they would get the spikes during certain time period of the year where they are running certain promotions, so the solution needed to scale to handle those spikes. And based on this criteria, the customer had also selected a cloud-based billing or payment management system. So they were using Zuora. The reason for Zuora they had done was that it already had integration with Salesforce. That was another key reason for them to go with Zuora. So let me...
Yes, may I ask you a question about this one? I admit that I have Super Bowl on the brain because it's already past holiday retail season here in Heroku land, and we're already thinking about Super Bowl and Super Bowl spikes. In your experience, have you seen customers be particularly concerned about this idea of, hey, we're going to have to sort of flex to meet, demand, increased demand in the wake of a marketing campaign or a product launch or anything like that? Has that been coming up more or less lately?
That is always has been coming up a lot more, and that's one of the reasons why we use the Heroku platform, and also because it provided the add-on later on in the slide. I'll talk about that. We use the new Relic add-on to monitor our usage and also allow us the scalability to say, okay, predict that, okay, you need this many dynos, so that way we can scale our infrastructure before the demand. So that's one of the key factor.
Great, carry on.
Okay, thank you. So here is very high level solution architecture for the e-commerce platform that we came up with this customer. As you can see, we have used Heroku platform to develop the customer-facing e-portal on the Ruby on Rails. The reason to go with Ruby on Rails platform was because that the customer already had the in-house expertise, and their development team were familiar with Ruby on Rails framework, so they did not have to learn any new language on Salesforce or Force.com if we had to end up developing on that. Right? Okay. The other advantage of where you can see on Heroku is that we use the add-on. So this is something that we highly recommend to the customer every time, because Salesforce ecosystem and Heroku ecosystem both have the great marketplace for a lot of the add-ons that can be leveraged for yours building out a complex solution. So here we use the Stormpath add-on for the user management. We use the SendGrid add-on for managing all the email communications. And we use the new Relic specifically for monitoring as well as the scaling the infrastructure on the Heroku platform. Just like typically all the e-commerce platform would have the need to present a lot of data, such as like current account information, their master product catalog, their subscription and billing information. And most of this data needs to be represented in more like a read-only mode to the end customer. Only when the user is making a subscription amendments or changes, that's when we have to go back to the external billing system or to the Salesforce. So this use case perfectly fit our need and our decision to go with Heroku Connect, where we were synchronizing the data bidirectionally between the Salesforce and the Heroku Postgres database, so that way we can leverage the Heroku Postgres database and render the user experience very quickly. And in the case of e-commerce portal, the main thing is the page load time. So making sure that the end customer doesn't have to wait for a long time to complete the transaction. And here we leverage the standard Salesforce REST-based APIs to integrate between the two clouds. So, and the reason for integrating using REST API where there were use cases where we needed to go directly, like the first time when the subscription record is getting created, we needed to go directly to external billing system and create those records. So, but those use cases were very, very far and few between. But we leverage heavily on Heroku platform.
Piyush, that's a great point. I've actually seen a number of customers who have done a sort of mixed implementation. For data that only needs to sync, every couple of seconds, so to speak, they're using Heroku Connect. But every now and then they want to make some kind of call to Force.com direct. And the really lovely thing about having all of this wrapped up into one platform is you can really choose the method of read, the method of write that best suits your particular implementation. It works both ways.
Yes, definitely. That's great. Okay. So here are some of the insights or recommendations that we from our perspective as we are working with the end customer, building out the use cases for Heroku. First and foremost is understand your use cases. So typically on Heroku platform, the use cases that work really well for the use is where you need external customer-facing application, where just like Margaret mentioned, that is the applications that are highly engaging as well as pixel perfect, then those needs to be a great use case for Heroku application. And the other use cases are where you need more control over content management. So typically the customers that we work with, if they already have Salesforce CRM, they would try to compare and contrast against what the Force.com platform capabilities are with the communities versus why they need to use the Heroku for e-commerce platform. So one of the main reasons to use Heroku would be to get a better control over your content management. And as you most of the customer-facing application would require agility to change and get updated frequently based on the promotion. So with the case of Heroku, that would be easier to manage and maintain with that. The other area that I would recommend for when you're looking for the use cases for the Heroku is that understand your system limitations and features, because as many cloud platform, as most of the cloud platform, because they are architected to be multi-tenant, they all would have some limitations. So understand your data volumes. So just like in previous slide, we went through the different use cases and understood our data volume to make sure that the data that is static in nature and doesn't need to get updated and in real time, we would use Heroku Connect to replicate between Salesforce and the Heroku Postgres. That's the key part of it. And then where the data you need the real-time updates or real-time retrieval, you still want to use the REST-based API integration to do that. The other insight is that as you work through to integrate different clouds, pay careful attention to your system of records and how your data is flowing, so that way you can always have the data integrity and always define which system is the system of record. So in this earlier use case that I talked about, the system of record was Salesforce. So Salesforce was the master for all the accounts and contacts. Zuora, on the other hand, was the master for the product catalog and subscription data. And the Heroku platform was master for all the user authentication. So that's how we separated out and ensure that there's only one single system whose system of record for the data elements on it. And I cannot stress this point enough on the evaluate your app exchange and add-ons on the Heroku, because many of these add-ons are free for trial period, and validate it while you're doing your POCs to ensure that your use cases are met. So that way it can definitely help you to focus the energy more into your solving your business use cases rather than trying to build something like infrastructure question, right? And look at your in-house skill set. So like with this other customer that we are working with, where we are building Internet of Things integration, they have expertise in Node.js. So we are building the application in Node.js because that's a critical factor to get the development teams buy-in, and also easier for the organization to maintain and keep enhancing and taking the ownership of the once the solution is rolled out to the finally. Okay. So back to you, Margaret.
Thanks, Piyush. I was really struck by how many of the observations you had in terms of insights and recommendations are really very similar for the customer example I'm going to walk through, which is Innisbrook, and for others that we're not necessarily covering on this particular webinar. But when we talk about, e-commerce on Heroku, we are very often talking about really a fairly architecturally complex implementation in which Salesforce plays a role, the Force.com platform plays a role, the Heroku platform plays a role. There's a lot of components. There's a lot of moving pieces to an e-commerce deployment. So let me first tell you a little bit about Innisbrook. So Innisbrook is a really interesting company to talk about right around the holidays because they are one of the leading school and nonprofit fundraising companies in the U.S. in particular. Any of you who have purchased chocolate or gift wrap or home goods or participated in, the neighbor's kids or your own kids or your nieces or nephews, school fundraiser for a field trip, for a school program, for a special fund, have almost certainly purchased a product from Innisbrook. And one of the ways that Innisbrook really empowers local organizations, particularly schools, to do that fundraising is by setting up a unique product catalog for every campaign and for every school, and then enlisting a set of fundraisers who then go out and they have a target for how much money each one wants to raise in service of a goal, and they really go out and drive the demand for people to purchase those goods, such as chocolate, such as gift wrap, and so on and so forth. And like the Girl Scouts, and I hope you all have seen their pretty fascinating promotional video, Innisbrook has for a very long time been operating really on a kind of paper and pencil model. You would, the kid next door would ring the doorbell, and you'd open the door, and they would be standing there asking you how many chocolate bars and how many rolls of gift wrap and ribbon and so forth you wanted to purchase. And recognizing that the business really needed to transform itself in a fairly substantive way for the world we now find ourselves in, Innisbrook launched a project called Project Easy Order. And their intention was to get it off the ground by their kind of key fall fundraising season, which is just now driving to a close. So there were a lot of anticipated benefits for doing this, from moving from what was really pencil and paper to a modern e-commerce system. One was just to improve the ordering process, to give Innisbrook more insight into demand for inventory planning, to give schools better insight into progress for fundraising so that they would understand where they were relative to their goals. And likewise, for the chair people who had agreed to try and drive a certain amount of sales for their elementary school, their high school, their church, their temple, whatever it might be, it really gave them insight into how well they were doing and what incentives they might qualify for by making sure they met those fundraising goals. So having real-time information about outstanding orders and progress towards goal was really a critical part of this system, and that's where Salesforce really came in terms of managing chair people who would roll up to a particular account for a school, Palo Alto Elementary, Fairfax County Elementary, Detroit PS3, didn't matter what it was. Having real-time tracking that was fed by this e-commerce system was an important objective. And likewise, really just having that clarity helped everyone who was participating in the process really kind of transform that fundraising process and provide the kind of clarity on your phone that you formerly might have gotten from a billboard pasted, that was on a pole outside of school drop-off, or outside of a local soup kitchen, or wherever else Innisbrook might be raising funds for, helping companies to raise funds for. So for their e-commerce solution, there were some really unique requirements. When, most of us think about e-commerce, we're thinking about an example like a Macy's. I want to go to Macy's.com. I want to use my Macy's mobile app, and I want to see all the lucky jeans and all the Fair Isle sweaters and all the Santa hats that they've got. Innisbrook doesn't work exactly like that. They set up a unique product catalog for every single institution, and then they provide a unique electronic storefront for that institution. So A temple and a church and an elementary and a high school might all have very, very different e-commerce storefronts. They might have very different goods for sale, and they might have a very different sort of look and feel. So when Technomile, which is the integration and Heroku integration and a services partner who helped Innisbrook with Project Easy Order, did this implementation, they basically used Magento for the cart, the catalog, and all of that, but they pulled all of the content from Salesforce because it was inside of Salesforce that they were managing which product catalogs would be available in each storefront. And then they used Heroku to actually run all of the individual storefronts for each institution. In order to keep all of the data integration moving, they used Heroku Connect, so everything that happened in their e-commerce storefront would be automatically synchronized back into the Salesforce deployment from the e-commerce storefront. They deployed a lot of social sharing mechanisms so that if I'm a good mommy and I bought my wrapping paper this year or my chocolate or whatever it might have been, I can go on Facebook and make sure all of my colleagues and friends and neighbors know that I've already done my bit for the kids' school. And kind of last but not least, Innisbrook is also a Service Cloud customer, and so they really wanted their reps to be able to handle all service inquiries, whether it came in on the phone, via email, via direct mail sometimes, or from the online ordering experience using the Service Cloud console. So some of the challenges that they encountered, and I'll show you a really pretty visual we have on this one, is that it was hard to do all of these custom storefronts with different organization-specific configurations. So finding a way to template those out using Magento was work. Likewise, scaling the business. Everybody kind of got back to school in August, and things went through the roof. So a really quiet period from almost, no orders other than people queuing the system and testing it to make sure that everything worked, to peak ordering season, 0 to 100 in days was hard. Just a lot of moving pieces to make sure everything was working and working correctly. Integration with some of the back-end systems, ERP systems that Innisbrook has, which were relatively dated for things like inventory management and packaging and shipping these goods out to the institutions, was definitely time-consuming. And making sure that that real-time dashboard was available, was understandable, was beautiful for customers and for partners who might want insight into how well their particular product line is doing this year, was an interesting adoption challenge. I just want to show you this visual because I think it conveys sort of what Innisbrook just went through. This is the UI of Heroku Connect, and what it is showing with the orange area is the amount of data it's reading out of Salesforce, and what it's showing with the blue graph area there at the top is the amount of data it's writing from the e-commerce orders back into Salesforce. And what you can see is, we were obviously in a system development phase for, several weeks over the summer there where things are sort of flatlined and there's just a little bit of, orange activity. And then back to school hit and chair people started signing up and, orders were generated and the data flow became very, very fast and rather big, really almost overnight. And as we got farther into the school year, we started seeing very, very regular sort of peaks and valleys around data movement. So, times when the little dips in the graph tend to be weekends, and the kind of bumps in the graph tend to be the weekdays when people are really placing orders using the Heroku-powered, e-commerce storefront. And again, this was from pencil and paper to millions of orders processed. Was quite a change for this company to absorb, and for all of us involved in the ecosystem of supporting them in this business transformation. It did take work, but it's completely worth doing. Okay, so a few best practices, and then we'll give you a short demo of Heroku and Heroku Connect and how it integrates data with Salesforce. A couple of the best practices from this: using different dyno types on Heroku for different operations. For those of you who are not that familiar with Heroku dynos, I encourage you to visit the Heroku Dev Center and read up on the platform and how it works. But essentially, you can use different units of compute for different kinds of processes. And sometimes something doesn't need a lot, and sometimes it needs really a lot. You really need, for instance, a performance dyno. So it's important to pay attention to which ones you're using for what processes. Using different apps for different operations. We see some apps which are, one code base. It's in a GitHub repo, and it's very simply deployed, using git push Heroku master. But we're seeing many more composed apps where different services run on different applications on Heroku and talk to each other, and that's a very common implementation pattern as well. Using a CDN to make sure that performance is relatively snappy, just as Piyush mentioned, is pretty important. And likewise, the add-ons ecosystem was really critical in terms of ease of implementation and management here, whether it was SendGrid for email or New Relic for logging, or coping with sort of SSL certificate management or changes in DNS. It was just very easy to use that ecosystem to kind of flesh out the full application. And, again, as I mentioned before, this customer in particular is also a Service Cloud customer, so having one place where they can handle all service inquiries, including those coming from their electronic storefronts, was pretty important. So I'm going to switch here to demo mode just for a moment, because I think I can see from some of the questions coming in that folks would like to see how Heroku Connect works. So give me a moment to switch my setup, and I'll share my desktop with you. Piyush, did you have any thoughts on similarities between the Innisbrook project and the project that you did and described earlier?
Yes. So one of the things I saw was that in the project you were describing, you were using Magento as a billing platform to integrate with. So that shows the how, even if you're using different systems to integrate with, what you can do with Heroku as a platform that you can integrate to all the different external systems. And some of the add-ons that you were also using were very similar to the add-ons that we ended up using for our customer, like SendGrid, the New Relic add-ons.
Yeah, I think that is very typical. We definitely see different commerce engines used by different customers on Heroku. Piyush, do you have any thoughts on which ones you've seen different Comity Designs customers using over the past quarter or year?
Yes. So we have helped one customer to implement Magento, and then the same customer, because of the different use cases, they ended up switching from Magento to Zuora. So we have also done the migration from Magento platform to Zuora platform. So those are two common billing platforms that we see in the marketplace that typically the customer starts with. Because the Magento, the use cases the customer starts with is they want to have the speed, and also they have some strong engineering team that is willing to take on the additional responsibility of having it hosted on premise or maintaining it. Right?
Yep. So let me give you all, we had one question about access to Heroku Connect, so I just wanted to point this out. You can just Google Heroku Connect, and it'll give you the marketing splash page where you can go ahead and sign up, and someone from Heroku will contact you. So it is possible to speak to a rep or someone at Heroku about access to Heroku Connect. There are a few other things you may want to know just as resources. The other one I'm going to point out now is that we actually have quite a bit of developer documentation on the Heroku Dev Center, which will go over everything that I'm about to show you, and kind of recap it so that you can replicate exactly the demo that I'm going to show you now in your own kind of local environment with your own Salesforce SDOs. Okay, so I'm going to take this kind of slow and easy, but the first thing I'm going to do is give you a little bit of a developer view of Heroku. Now, you don't have to come in and use Terminal to use Heroku. You can actually go to our graphical user interface dashboard, and you can create apps, and you can add databases, and you can add add-ons simply, through clicks. So this is not the only way to operate on Heroku, but I'm going to do it this way just for the sort of sake of simplicity. So all I have done is logged into Heroku, and I have created an app, and that app is called Blooming Headland 5179. And now I'm going to go ahead and add a Heroku Postgres database to it. I'm going to add Connect to it, and then I'm going to sync some Salesforce data into my Postgres database. So this is how simple Heroku is to operate. I'm going to use a premium Postgres plan for my app. And let's see, my app's name is called Blooming Headland 5179. Okay. Now what's happening is this database is literally being created as we watch, and now it is it's there, it's empty, and now I'm going to add Heroku Connect to this particular app. Okay, now that's all done. Oops, I missed a bit. Add-ons, add Heroku Connect. Okay, that's exactly how much code it took for, just terminal commands it took for me to create an app on Heroku, create a database, and then add Heroku Connect to it. And once I've done that, excuse me for a moment while I go back to my graphical user interface here, we are going to see Blooming Headland appear in our list. There is our new app. There is our database that we just created. There is our Heroku Connect. And what I can do now is go in and configure this to sync to a Salesforce org. And I'm going to do this to a demo org I have, and then I'm going to show you what it looks like when you have an app running on top of Salesforce and syncing data very actively between the two. Now, typically what happens is people go in and they make a decision around production and sandbox. One of the questions that has come in over the monitor while we've been talking is about whether or not how you sort of manage the sandbox and production data switch. The fact is that what typically happens is people create a development environment, a staging environment, and a production environment all on Heroku, and they tend to use sandbox data with the development and staging environments, and then they tend to use production data with the production environments. Now, all I have done is authenticated to my Salesforce org, and if I decide that I want to go in and copy all of the data from this particular Salesforce org into a Postgres database, I simply pick the object. I pick whichever fields I want. I decide whether I want to read only or read write it. And Heroku Connect is going to go and start creating that table. And it just, as you can see from the timestamps, this is all done. I only have 5 rows of account data in this particular org. So we're there. We're actually done. And if we go back and look at activity, you're going to see now that 5 rows of data have synced. What is actually happening here? If I actually went into my phone and I logged into a mobile app, and this particular app is one which is designed to sell chocolate, and I went in and I looked at this particular customer's record inside of Salesforce, I would see that this particular record, I have no loyalty status for this person. I have no interactions for this person. I just have very little data for this fictional Nina Torres person. But if I'm a consumer and I go in and I start interacting with this app, what I'm going to see is that I'm achieving new loyalty program status, and I am interacting with products in a way that's going to generate data inside my Salesforce deployment. And I'll show you what that looks like now. Notice that my loyalty program status has changed, and I now have a whole bunch of interactions which were just created in the last moment. Piyush brought up a point about real-time sync versus non-real-time sync. Heroku Connect moves pretty fast. From the app to Salesforce takes about 10 seconds, and you can make decisions about how fast you want to go when you are setting up a sync for yourself. Could be every 2 minutes, could be every 60 minutes. It's really up to you. So choose whether it's real time or every 2 minutes. So I'm going to pause here, and let's see if we have, I know there's a bunch of questions that are in queue, and I wanted to make sure that we got to those. So let me get out of the demo. And my colleague, Michelle Kim, is going to help us by reading through some of the questions that have come in on the webinar screen and then help direct them to myself and to Piyush.
All right, so everybody, if you haven't had the opportunity yet, go ahead and answer your questions. I know we have some already in there. It should be on the question function on that Bright Talk. So this first one came in. So Margaret, I think this one might be for you. So what e-commerce systems do your customers typically use?
Ooh, that's a good one. Piyush, that one might be even better for you. I know that we see Zuora, we see Magento, we see Demandware. Any others that come to mind for you right away, Piyush?
No, I think that those three are the one that we have also seen in our customer base typically. But Zuora and Magento being the more primary e-commerce platform that we see.
I will say, though, I mean, most customers that walk in the door have a lot of pre-existing investment in inventory management, ERP systems. They bring their own relationships and preferences to the table. So it comes up, that is by no means the sort of galaxy of vendors that we've encountered. Those are just a couple that I've been hearing a lot about lately.
So we have another one here. So this is actually one that a couple people have. So do the customers need a Salesforce.com license to use the e-commerce website application?
That is a great question. It's definitely one that you should talk to a rep about, because I think all of the implementations that Piyush and I have covered today have involved Force.com licensing, Salesforce Service Cloud licensing, Sales Cloud licensing, and Heroku just for the pieces and parts of the system that we have visibility into, as well as any other arrangement you might have with another vendor. One really nice thing about Heroku is that when you use an add-on provider like a New Relic or like a Chargeify or like a Rediscreen or something like that, you actually get consolidated billing from Salesforce. So it's one invoice to use kind of everything, and that has really helped a lot of people just get off the ground fast.
Yeah. And to add on to Margaret's point, with this specific customer, we had based on the budget restriction, there are a lot of ways to build out the e-commerce platform. So you would have a choice, especially those of you who might be already a Salesforce CRM customer. If you already have Service Cloud license, you might be thinking of building out communities. So look at your use cases and see where does it make sense to use the community versus where to build out your e-commerce platform on the Heroku, so where you can understand the licensing impact of those licenses.
Great. So I think this next question might be something maybe both of you guys could bring different perspective on. So how long did it take to develop the application?
So I'll tell a little bit about some of the long tent poles I observed from the Innisbrook implementation. I would say that the integration to ERP systems took longer than anyone imagined it could have. And likewise, behavioral adoption, making sure that people understood there was a place that they could log in and see dashboards and things like that probably took longer, and almost everything else took shorter than expected. But I would ballpark total development time at perhaps a few months. Piyush, I don't know about how it went for you in that project.
Yeah. No, in case of our implementation lasted for 3 months, and that included a team of 4 people, but that included the configuration on Salesforce as well as billing and e-commerce and testing out the whole solution. So as you can see, the power of the platform, that in 3 months you can be up and running on e-commerce platform. The long pole on the tent there was mainly the data conversion from their old e-commerce platform back into the new infrastructure.
Yeah, good point. Normalizing data is always fun. So go ahead.
Another question here, I think that maybe both of you guys as well can shed some light on is, how do you manage sync during development lifecycle with Sandbox?
How did you handle that, Piyush? Did you use Sandbox?
Yes, definitely. That's one of the reasons why the development lifecycle is also shorter in the Salesforce platform. And what we did is that we created, just like Margaret had mentioned earlier, we created 3 separate environments on Heroku for our development, staging, or QA or UAT, and then the production. And we had separate instances of the Heroku Connect connecting to our data sync to different environments. And that's where the power of the feature that Margaret just provided, right? That how often do you want to sync? Because that, on our development purpose, we can just synchronize once a day because we don't have that much data that is changing while in production. We can leverage it to do the sync every 5 minutes or so. Right?
Yeah, and one of the big benefits of Heroku Connect is that it really manages all of the interactions with the Force.com API on behalf of the developer. So that, whether you want to use bulk or whether you want to use standard API, whether you want to create push topics or, however often you want to kind of do the diff between old and new data, Heroku Connect will manage all of that for you, and you don't really have to worry about that, in your process. I guess I would say I cannot think of a single customer who is in production now, who doesn't have at least one complete staging environment with Sandbox and Heroku Connect, and one, plus the production environment, obviously, with the production data and Heroku Connect. And, sometimes it goes all the way back down into, a dev or an integration environment as well. But obviously both Sandbox and production are fully supported. I think one thing that comes up with Sandbox and production is making sure that it's more of a business process issue, that you've got like people with all the correct permissions in both both instances, able to set things up. Anyway, it looks like we are just at the top of the hour, so in the interest of getting you guys all back to your work days, thank you so much for your time and attention. It's very flattering, and I hope you have a wonderful holiday season. Thanks, Piyush.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.